Alright, so welcome to Nick Sibicky's Music Production Secrets. In the last two videos we discussed some various aspects of sound, including the velocity of it, right? How fast does it travel, its amplitude, its frequency, right? Some basic characteristics of sound. I know my handwriting sucks. Don't leave me a bad comment in the YouTube channel just because my handwriting sucks, please. I know this part, you don't have to tell me. So I have these three parameters of sound we've already kind of defined, but I want to talk a little bit about humans. And here we go, here's my human. Because even though sound is all these things in reality, right, in the physical world, we actually perceive of it through our own biases. And some of these biases are really worth pointing out. So the first of these biases I want to talk about is just in terms of our localization. So this is a nice big fancy word. If we're in the United States, we spell it with a Z. I think the Brits spell it with an S. I could be wrong though. Anyway, localization. I don't know why I put an S there. Probably because I said S. Alright, localization, there we go. And what this means is how we determine where a sound is coming from. And this might seem, here let me draw some ears here. Those kind of look like headphones, but they're ears. This might kind of seem like it's obvious, right? Well, you know where sound's coming from, and I ask you how, and you go, well, because it's coming from a certain place, and I go, no, that doesn't tell me how, and then you just stare at me blankly, right? And that's where our conversation is going. Well, I'm going to try to alleviate some of the mystery about how you determine where a sound comes from. And the first, and perhaps this is just either the most obvious thing or not so obvious thing, is that if a sound is coming from over here, so let's say it's coming from this way. So here's bumping into all these air molecules right until it bumps into the one that's next to your eardrum. Well, obviously you have an ear on this part of your head, and you have an ear on part of this head. And yes, this sound, because remember, sound propagates and it'll bounce off all these molecules. You will hear this sound. Sometimes some of it will go through your head and then into this ear. Okay, but this sound will eventually hit both of your ears. But there's a couple immediate obvious parts to this. Number one, if you remember from the first video on acoustics, but this is two videos, maybe three videos back? Two videos back, I think, we noticed that at the source, sound is a lot louder than a few iterations away, right? Because it's always spreading out and thus it's always losing energy each time. Okay, so this ear will actually hear a louder version of that sound than this ear. Okay, so number one, one of the ways in how you localize a sound is through amplitude. Right? If one of your ears hears a louder sound, that's going to send a message to your brain saying, hey, it's coming from over here, this way, follow me. And that's all great. But this also creates a timing difference. So, and in fact, this timing difference is often so slight, we can call it a timing difference or maybe even a phase difference. And we'll explain what that means in a moment. But in other words, the sound will hit this ear first. Remember how sound is kind of slow, right? At least compared to light, it's 1130 feet a second. Well, if your head is, 6 inches wide, what that really means is that, it's going to take an extra, half a second. There's a half second, not half a second. Sorry, half a millisecond. Thank you, half a millisecond to hit this ear after it hits this ear. And your brain and your ears are fast enough to actually for that to be a significant difference. Your brain and ears can actually interpret difference in timing even faster than that, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. Your ears and your brain, subconsciously at least, are working on a much, much faster thinking pace than you can normally think about, right? Normally, like our actual cognitive thinking ability is actually pretty slow, but the subconscious, behind the scenes ear processing mechanism is very, 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 very fast. Half a millisecond or less kind of fast. So very fast. Be proud. Feel like you're Superman for the day, I guess. All right, so we have this phase or timing difference. I'll just hyphenate it for right now. There's another difference in the sense that if you see that you have a big fat head here in the way, all right, here's your big fat head. When sound hits this ear, this head is actually going to get in the way of the sound and actually cause it to sound a little bit different in this ear. And we'll talk about what different ways it makes it sound different probably in the next video, but just know that it does. Your head will actually shape the sound and cause it to sound a little bit differently. So we have, I'm going to call the head's shadow, or acoustic shadow. Acoustic shadow. That's shadow, believe me. Okay, so there's three great ways for you to help for you to help determine for yourself if a sound is coming from your right or your left. But what about front to back or up and down? This is where it gets a little bit tricky. And front to back is actually pretty obvious. At least not obvious how you do it, but obvious in terms of, where is the sound just coming from in your daily life, right? You have, in other words, you have a pretty easy job determining if there's a train coming at you from the front or if there's a train coming at you from the back. That actually isn't terribly hard for you to do. But again, the question is how? If we go down here and look at these things that we just noticed, if something is coming from directly in front of you, well, it's going to hit both of your ears with the same amplitude. It's going to hit both your ears at the same time, and your head isn't going to cast an acoustic shadow. So none of these three things will actually help you determine where a sound is coming from. And if you think about it, the same is true from the back. So if a sound is coming from directly behind you, it's hitting both your ears, the same amplitude, the same time, and your head isn't casting an acoustic shadow. So how do we determine if a sound is in front of us or behind us? I'll give you a moment to think about it. Well, now I'm just going to tell you because now I'm bored. I don't want to sit around all day waiting for you to think about it. If you think about your ears, first of all, you'll notice that they have these little flappy parts. Let's see if I can draw a flappy part. There's something like this. That's pretty... It started off really well, didn't it? Don't you have to agree? Like, here's a person's head, and, here's their eyeball, and here's their nose, and here's their chin. That's supposed to be a mouth. That's a tiny nose. Alright, so this is obviously some sort of grotesque alien ogre. But you see this flappy thing, right? This big flappy thing. This is the part of the head that I think aliens, when they come down and greet us, this is the part they're going to make fun of. And, behind our backs, they're going to say, haha, those humans with the giant flappy skinny things on the sides of their head? Haha, they're so funny looking. Okay, but this is called the pinna. And this pinna has a lot to do with how we actually determine where sound is coming from. And if you just, I don't know, I challenge you to do this while you're sitting at home in front of your computer, reach up and touch your pinna, and you'll see that they're actually angled to the front of your face, right? You don't have, your pinna aren't basically trying to guide in sound from the back, they're trying to guide in sound from the front. And this actually creates a very big difference in terms of the sound, just because how they're shaped. What you're going to be able to hear is a lot more higher frequencies will actually come from the front, and sounds that have a lot fewer higher frequencies will sound like they're from behind you. And, there's a lot of other giveaways too, but this is one of the big ones, okay? So it has to do with the shape of the pinna, and, what sort of frequency content and what sort of frequencies get canceled out too. This is another thing that I don't want to dive into too much, but your ear will actually reflect sounds, and some of them will cancel out, and that will be a major clue to your brain as to where sound is coming from. This pinna also helps in determining up and down. And if you ever noticed, up and down is actually a lot harder to determine than front to back and side to side. We can still do it. It's not like it's impossible or anything, but it's just more of a challenge. If a sound is coming from left or right, it's like instantaneously. Front and back, instantaneously. If it's up and down, it's almost like you have to think about it for an extra split second. So we have the pinna to thank for that. And again, this makes sense just evolutionarily, right? Because for the most part, our ancestors were wandering the jungle, and most of the major predators. I'm not sure why I drew an arrow there. I was supposed to draw a tree for the jungle. Here's my attempt at a jungle tree. That's a tree. Oh yeah, alright, I'll say it again. No more YouTube comments about my drawings. They're pretty bad, I know. You don't have to tell me. Okay, so there's some trees, and we're wandering the jungle. And yes, there are some things that occasionally happen above us. Most of the major predators that we have to run from, right, are going to be, at our level, or around our level, right? So there's a stone, a rock apparently, that we have to run from. Maybe there is a tiger over here, right? It's kind of at our level. I'm not sure why that tiger's legs are so incredibly fat. Alright, he has got that saber tooth. That's a tiger. Kind of looks like a penguin with 3 legs or something. I don't know what that is anymore. Okay, but anyway, the point is, right, left and right and front to back, really important. Up and down, only sometimes. So this is our sound localization. If you ever wanted to know anything else about sound localization, there's a lot of books on it. There's actually a whole lot of studies going to this whole phase timing difference, and we're going to learn a trick later on, one of Nick Sibicky's music production secrets called the Haas effect, and we're going to learn how to utilize that this phenomenon, our ears, to actually manipulate music in certain ways and give certain impressions to the listener. But that'll be in a later video, not for today. But if you want to know more about it right now, just go online, look up the Haas effect, and you can already start playing with it. Alright, stay tuned for the next video. You won't want to miss it because it has to do with how humans perceive frequency, which is not at all how you might think.